Hello, everyone. I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby, and today I'm joined by Theodore Shapiro, the brilliant composer of the music of Severance on Apple TV Plus. First of all, congratulations on this hit series you've got on your hands. The music is so integral to everything that's going on. Talk to me first about how you learned about this mysterious world of Lumen, the innies and the outies, and then how you went about thinking about what the music should sound like.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. I first learned about this show very casually at, I think it was like a Halloween party where I was at a Halloween party with Adam Scott, who I know because our kids go to school together, and he mentioned that he was working on this series with Ben Stiller. And he mentioned a little something about what the premise was, and it sounded amazing. And I sort of thought, oh, I hope I get that call, but who knows what will happen. And then very happily at a certain point in late 2019, Ben called and he told me about the series and he sent me a couple of scripts. And it was just immediately so thrilling and sparked so many ideas. And I started writing themes immediately. It just took me in so many different directions. And my process with Ben began, and it really just spread out into exciting places and gave us the foundation for where we could get started with the show.
And you've worked with Ben quite a bit before.
Yeah.
So how did that relationship start? And is that what sort of continued to bring you into this project?
How did my relationship with Ben start?
Yeah.
Very early on in my career, I worked on two movies that he was in, and he liked the music for, there was Along Came Polly and Starsky and Hutch, and he liked the music in both of those movies. And so he got me involved in Dodgeball, which he was producing. That was immediately after those two films. And that one went really well. And so then the next time he was directing a movie, which was Tropic Thunder, he asked me to work on that. And, we've been working together pretty steadily ever since. And, he is such a phenomenal director, and, he holds impressively so many aspects of the production in his head at one time. I find with Ben that if I trust his instincts, it's going to lead me to a good place. And so I'm always very fortunate, or I always feel very fortunate to be working with him, because I feel like I can trust his guidance.
And you mentioned as soon as you spoke to him, you had these sort of melodies going through your head.
Yeah.
Is that always happening to you? Like, I'm so fascinated by people that can compose music because I don't understand it. So to me, it's fascinating. Is that just a gift you've always had?
It's certainly something that as I've gained experience working on film, that it happens, just sort of automatically. As I'm reading a script, my brain just starts sparking off in different directions. It's interesting because in the case of Severance, I immediately had an idea for something that Ben really liked, and we traveled down the road for a while of a pretty different direction. I mean, not into production, but for a while he really liked this other theme that was it was vocal primarily, and then somehow we found our way back to what ultimately became the main theme of this series. And once we landed there, it really just unlocked the whole thing.
And talk about how you come up with the main thing. So theme.
Yeah,
That
well,
sort of piano, and then there's a crescendo, and then
yeah.
it weaves throughout the whole series, unlike some of the
Well,
others.
so first of all, we landed on it in a somewhat in a sideways direction, which is I had written early on, and this goes back to early 2020. I had written something that was more kind of electronic and beat driven, but it had this middle section with a chord progression that I thought was kind of interesting. And Ben, when we met, I flew to New York in February of 2020, and we met, and he showed me all of the drawings and the lookbooks, and sort of all of his ideas for what the show was going to be. And he kept kind of fast forwarding to this section that had this chord progression. And I thought, there's something he's responding to here that should be expanded on. And when I got back to Los Angeles, I sat down at the piano and I started playing that chord progression, but just on the piano. And it was like, oh, here's something really cool. Like this kind of takes the whole score, and instead of emphasizing a more electronic science fiction aspect to it, it really zeroes in on the mystery of what's happening at Lumen. And I sent, so I had this idea, and I wrote like a 2.5-minute version of it, and I sent it to Ben, and I heard nothing for like weeks. And I was like, oh man, I liked that. Like, it's too bad he didn't respond to that. And then at some point he called and he was like, oh, hey, I'm listening to this piece. Like, this is really cool. And so we just started zeroing in on that idea. And I took it and created a 1.5-minute long version of it that that I thought could be a good candidate for a main title sequence. And that's what it became. It really, the animators came in and animated to that, and that's sort of how that process was born.
Another one that sort of stands out to me because it's so different than a lot of the rest is Labor of Love, it's called. I'm curious, how you came up with that song, because it's a little like Fantasy Island. It just has a total different vibe to it, and it's sort of humorous. What brought you into that song?
Well, Ben and George Draculius, the music supervisor, had been zeroing in on this kind of late 50s exotica jazz as like the sound of Lumen, like this sort of like happy jazzy sonic world for the innies. And early on, I got the scene where Adam's walking down the long sort of maze of halls for the first time, and I just wanted to write something for it in that style, and I love that style. I love Henry Mancini, so the opportunity to write something sort of in that vein that I could really tailor to the scene was something that I was pretty excited to get my hands on.
Is that how most of it? So you talked about how you came up with the main theme, and then when you're coming up with everything else, are you watching pieces of it, or do you come up with most of the music prior, or how does that work?
It was really a mixture with this show, and one thing I love to do is avoid having temp music, which, if for people who don't know, is often when a movie or a TV show is being made, there's not a score yet, so they take music from other movies or TV shows and cut it in as a placeholder. And it's a death trap for composers, because as soon as there's something that is cut in that works, the director gets used to it, and if you're the composer, you're looking at it and it kind of puts its fingerprints on the scene, and it becomes hard to imagine a different approach if it's working. And so, because I wanted to avoid that, before the, as the show was in production, and even before the show was in production, I wrote a huge amount of music, over an hour of music, that could be used and cut into the show as it was being edited, so that there would only be original music, specific to Severance in the show at all times. And then as they were cutting, sometimes they would take a piece and it would really work. Sometimes they wouldn't have anything, and so I'd write something new. But always with the goal of keeping the sonic palette of the show really unique and specific to the show. And it was a great process.
And how many musicians go into, the final product that we're hearing?
So the strings were performed by 3 string players, and multi-tracking with themselves. And there is, I worked with Zach Ray, a brilliant synth guru, who came in and did an improvisational session. And then the rest is me.
Wow. What's the creepiest instrument? If you want to spook someone out, what instrument do you want on there?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the funny thing is that I think in this show, we worked with such a minimal palette, and a lot of times what can work best in terms of creepiness is just utter simplicity. Sometimes just a few notes on the piano are enough to be scarier than a 90-piece orchestra doing crazy stuff. I love shows or films that work with a minimal palette like that. And so that was a great gift to be able to play in that kind of a sandbox.
At what age did you know that, you had this gift for music? Do you think it's a gift, or did you can you study your way to be at that level? Because I've interviewed other composers and they're like, no, I kind of knew when I was a child.
I mean, it's funny, like music was just always a thing that came very easily to me. Even from the time I was like 6 and started taking piano lessons, it just all came very naturally to me. And as I got older, I would sit and I would make things up at the piano, which I just thought that everybody did, and only later learned that, like, no, for a lot of people, playing the piano means reading the music that's in front of you, and not just inventing stuff. So, I do think that from a pretty young age, I had a propensity for doing this. But of course, it's a combination, because I studied very hard, and I had great teachers, and and so there's always some combination of a natural inclination and then teaching.
Who are some of your musical heroes growing up? I mean, you mentioned Mancini, or were there more? Or
in the film world, John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith. I had 2 very seminal early experiences at the movies, watching films that sparked my interest in film scoring. And one of them was Raiders of the Lost Ark, which was the seminal movie of my childhood. And I'll never forget the night that I went to Jamie Keeler's birthday party and saw that movie. It was indelible to me. And I saw Chinatown as a young kid. It's interesting. Like I was probably 8, and for some reason they showed Chinatown at the sleepaway camp that I went to, which is wildly inappropriate. I think that the young kids were sent to bed before Faye Dunaway gets shot in the eye. But I have this very vivid recollection of there's a scene early in the film where Jack Nicholson encounters a boy on a horse in the desert, and Goldsmith has written this very evocative music where he's using brushes on the inside of a piano. It's a very a very evocative sound, and it made this huge impression on me because I was somehow aware that the sound of the music was making the scene feel more dry. It was making the desert feel more dry. And it stuck with me that the music was somehow, with its colors, producing a feeling. And that was a connection that just stuck with me and kind of got me interested in what music and picture could do.
And just bringing it back to Severance, when you look back on that whole experience, what is going to be your greatest memory, or what do you look back on and feel the most joy from about the whole experience?
I'll tell you, it was such a positive experience all the way through. I mean, it was just a great collaboration with Ben and Jeff Richmond, the principal editor, and the process itself was a joy. But the greatest part of it was actually watching the show as an audience member. It's interesting because I mostly work on features, and usually in the process of working on a feature, by the time you get to the end, you've seen the film so many times. You've been to a bunch of previews, and you've watched the whole thing so many times that the film doesn't surprise you anymore. And I found that with this series, because there weren't those experiences, and you couldn't watch all 9 episodes at once, over and over again. There was a freshness that I found to watching the series from the beginning as an audience member on Apple TV in real time, that I don't get to experience it when I work on a feature. And, I just think the show is so good, and it's so good across every department. I'm just blown away by the cinematography and the production design, and the editing, and it's all, I think, a real testament to first of all, to Dan Erickson's vision, and also just to Ben's leadership. He's just so impressive across every department. The casting is so good, and the acting is so good, and to get to experience that as an audience member, and to have it really feel fresh, and to feel like I was discovering the show in that way, was really a thrill.
Such an incredible team effort that you're a part of as well. And Theodore Shapiro, congratulations on your brilliant work on Severance. It's streaming now on Apple TV Plus. You can stream the soundtrack as well. That's a fantastic listen. To our viewers, head over to goldderby.com, make your awards predictions, beat our experts, and watch more interviews with top contenders. And Theodore, thanks for chatting with Gold Derby today.
Thank you so much for having me.